Hi Vikings, I'm Terry,
And I'm Susan. Welcome to Vike Equip.
where we are equipping you, our students, to be successful in the classroom.
We've been talking about how sometimes we can read an article, make it all the way to the end of the article, and have no clue what we just read, and how frustrating that is. It seems like such a waste of time. And so there are strategies in place that will help us to improve our reading comprehension. One of those strategies is known as outlining. Usually we think of outlining as an effective strategy for writing. When your professors are asking you to put together an essay, you sit down for a few minutes and you think through your ideas and you organize them into an outline. Most of my students will walk through a process something like this. If I assign an essay that says, "Tell me why you like being a Carl Albert Viking," then they might organize it in this way. They might say, well, I know this is kind of the brainstorm, right? This is the pre-write, the brainstorm. I know I like being a Viking because of the classes. The classes are small. I have great classmates. I enjoy the faculty. I also like Carl Albert because of the convenience. It's only 30 minutes from my home. And I can take online classes, which allows me to work full time. Sometimes students will also like the cost. It's a cheaper tuition here at Carl Albert. And there are scholarships and financial aid available. And so first of all, they'll get their ideas together and can see very clearly that they have 3 good points to work with. They'll then take those 3 points and put them into an outline form. And you're familiar with outlines. Outline is a system of working with numbers and letters. Each time we move to a new sub-level, we change back and forth between numbers and letters, numbers and letters, numbers and letters. Look, numbers, these are numbers, letters, right? I go numbers, letters, and then if I continue to go again, I go numbers again. If I go beyond this, I'm going to go back to letters, but it's going to be a lowercase letter. Sometimes students are tempted to work with bullets, and if bullets work for you, okay. But the most effective way to use the outlining strategy is using this number and letter system, back and forth, back and forth. So you can see that we've taken our 3 points now and popped them into the outline. We like the classes. Under classes, we like classmates, small size, and faculty. That gives us some details to write about in that paragraph. We like the convenience. There's that 30 minutes from home, commute, and online classes. We like the cost. It's cheaper tuition, and we have financial assistance, including financial aid and scholarships. Then I would have a paragraph that would wrap everything up. So we've been using this strategy called outlining as a writing strategy, but it's also effective as a reading strategy. You just have to use it in reverse. Now, instead of coming up with the outline, you're trying to get inside the head of the author to figure out what their outline was. And I guarantee you, every good author works from an outline. So that's what you're looking for. Outlining is actually a very effective strategy, especially with textbooks. You can see in this history textbook that as I look at the pages, there are headings. So it's broken into these natural sections, which will become the points in my outline. I see that there are bold orange headings, right? Everything's in capital letters. They're a little larger. I see these turquoise headings, but they're smaller. So I immediately began to say, all right, the large orange will be my Roman numerals, and the small turquoise will be the letters that come under those numerals. Then the details of those portions labeled with the turquoise letters become my details under it. They would be my 1s, 2s, and 3s, right? So declaring independence would be a Roman numeral 1. Under it, A, declaration by committee. Here I can begin to give dates. June 7th, 1776, Virginia Delegate Richard Henry Lee presented a resolution. Right, so it seems like a pretty important date, a pretty important name. So I could list that as a detail under my A. Then I move on to the text of the declaration, my B. Details in here that I think are important become my 1, 2, 3s. I go to C, publicizing the declaration. Again, my details under it would be 1, 2, 3s. And then finally, I see a bold orange, which means I come back on my outline to the Roman numeral. It gets a Roman numeral 2, and we start the process all over again. By the time I finish the outline of this chapter, I have understood it, comprehended it, and I have a great set of notes to study when test time rolls around. We can also use outlining with articles that we're interacting with. I usually use the outlining strategy when I look at an article and I can see that it has natural headings, like this one on what happened to Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz. As I look down through here, I can see those natural headings. So what happened? How were they exonerated? What happened to Williamson and Fritz next? So when I see those natural headings, I'm like, oh, okay, that could easily be my Roman numerals, my main points. And so I'll begin to organize it as I read the information. So as I'm reading this article, I can also be in the process of making an outline because I've surveyed it, I've scanned it, I've seen how it's organized with those natural headings. I can now use those natural headings as my main points. I can see that the article starts off with an intro. That part didn't have a heading over it. So here's where I'm going to collect some information. It talks a little bit about Ron Williamson. It talks a little bit about Dennis Fritz. That's going to be my A and my B. The details about each one become the 1, 2, 3s underneath. So again, you see number, letter, back to number. These are Roman numerals. These are just our numeral system, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's my intro paragraph. I've given the information I found there. The next heading, what happened? So this is where it's going to talk about the crime itself. I can see that first of all, it's giving me details about Deborah Sue Carter. So she gets a letter, she's my A, and I can tell details about her underneath. Then we meet the suspects. We can quickly see that we have the 2 suspects, Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz. So I'm going to put their names as my suspects and then details under them. Again, because Dennis is a 2, the details under him, he was a number, the details become letters. Then I see that it switches to the evidence, from suspect to evidence, still in this same section, still under the same heading and main point. So here I'm going to give the details that I found that were convincing evidence for these 2 men being guilty. Then we see that 5 years later, how did they end up in jail? I've taken the details from there. Williamson was in jail for forging checks and another inmate said he was guilty. Right? Fritz was arrested and supposedly confesses to another inmate. He's arrested because he was guilty with association. He was in that bar with Williamson. So this is kind of the story of what happens when they're incarcerated. And then the conviction comes. We know that Williamson was given death row and Dennis Fritz was given life in prison. Okay, so that's everything under that heading. Then I move on to the next heading. How were they exonerated? Well, they were exonerated in April of 1999 because DNA shows that those hairs did not match. We find out that Glenn Gore, who had originally pointed a finger at these 2, was the one who actually committed the crime. And then in that last section, what happened to Williamson and Fritz? Here I can tell what happened to Williamson. He's my A. The details underneath it go back to numbers. Fritz becomes my B, and the details about what happened in his life then become the numbers. You'll notice that I added a detail here because as I was reading this article, I realized it had been written several years ago. So I thought, I need to find out if Fritz is still alive. As I did, I realized that he passed away in March of 2024. So that's a detail that I can add that would really impress my instructors because it shows that I've gone above and beyond the article in front of me. Right, so this is how we make an outline. An outline, again, is another strategy that will help you to understand what you're reading. Grab the comprehension.